A quiet road outside a small Texas town. An older black man behind the wheel of a worn pickup truck. A young officer, searching for a reason to prove himself. Before the evening was over, one careless traffic stop would reach a nearby military base, open years of buried complaints, and force an entire police department to answer a question it had avoided for far too long. But at that moment, General Arthur Pendleton wanted none of that. He only wanted to get home before dark. The late afternoon sun hung low over the Texas fields, spreading a soft orange light across the dry grass. Arthur drove with one hand resting on the steering wheel and the other near the open window. Warm air moved through the cab of his old blue pickup, carrying the smell of dust, cedar, and distant rain. The truck was nearly 20 years old. Its paint had faded along the hood. One side mirror shook whenever Arthur drove above 50 miles an hour, and the radio only worked when it felt like it. Arthur could have replaced it many times over. He had spent most of his adult life in the United States Army and now wore 4 stars on his uniform. He had ridden in armored vehicles, government aircraft, and polished black cars driven by military staff. Yet the old pickup remained his favorite. It had belonged to his father. Arthur had learned to drive in that truck on a dirt road not far from where he was now. His father had been a mechanic, a quiet man with rough hands and a patient way of explaining how broken things worked. He used to say that every engine gave a warning before it failed. The problem was that most people were too busy talking to hear it. Arthur had remembered those words through decades of military service. He had heard warnings in the silence before an attack. He had heard them in the uncertain voice of a young officer making a dangerous decision. He had heard them in meetings where powerful people smiled while hiding fear. That afternoon, the warning came as a faint tapping beneath the hood. Arthur listened carefully, then eased his foot off the gas. "Not today," he said softly. The truck answered with another quiet rattle. Arthur gave a tired smile. He had spent the morning at a military ceremony outside San Antonio, where he had spoken to several hundred new soldiers about duty and leadership. His formal uniform now hung inside a garment bag behind the seat. He had changed into a plain gray work shirt, faded jeans, and an old brown jacket before starting the drive home. Without the uniform, he looked like any other older man traveling through the Texas countryside. That was exactly how he preferred it. He had no driver, no security vehicle, and no visible sign of rank. His military identification rested inside a leather wallet in the center console. A small emergency device, issued because of his position, was clipped beneath the dashboard where no one could see it. Arthur rarely thought about the device. It had been explained to him as a basic safety measure. Pressing it would send a silent signal to the nearest military command center, along with his location. He had never used it. He hoped he never would. The road narrowed as he entered Bellwether, a town built around a courthouse square, a few churches, and a main street lined with businesses that closed early. The welcome sign claimed the town had a population of just over 4,000. Someone had placed fresh flowers beneath it, though the summer heat had already caused them to bend. Arthur had not been through Bellwether in many years. The name stirred something in his memory. His son, Daniel, had once driven through the town while coming home from college. It had happened almost 15 years earlier. Daniel had been stopped, questioned, and searched by local officers. They claimed his car matched the description of a stolen vehicle, even though the color and model were different. They left him sitting beside the road for nearly 2 hours. No charges were filed. No apology was offered. Arthur had encouraged Daniel to report what happened. Daniel did, but the complaint disappeared into the department. Months later, Arthur received a short letter saying the officers had acted within policy. Daniel never forgot it. Neither did Arthur. He remembered sitting at the kitchen table while his son tried to laugh about the event. Daniel had been 20 years old, strong and proud, but Arthur could see the shame beneath the smile. It was the shame of being treated as dangerous while knowing you had done nothing wrong. Arthur had faced prejudice before, but watching it settle into his son had been different. He had wanted to act. He had wanted to use every connection he had. Daniel asked him not to. "I don't want them to do the right thing because they're afraid of you," he had said. "I want them to do it because it's right." They never did. Arthur passed the courthouse square and continued toward the northern edge of town. The old memory stayed with him, quiet but heavy. Then he noticed the patrol car. It had been parked beside an abandoned gas station. As Arthur drove past, the vehicle pulled onto the road behind him. He checked his speed. 43 in a 45 zone. He looked at his rearview mirror. The patrol car stayed several car lengths back. Arthur kept driving, listening to the small rattle beneath his hood. A minute passed. Then red and blue lights flashed behind him. Arthur felt no panic, only a slow disappointment. He turned on his signal and guided the truck onto a wide gravel shoulder. He shut off the engine, lowered his window, and placed both hands on the steering wheel. The patrol car stopped behind him. For several seconds, nothing happened. Arthur watched through the side mirror as the driver spoke to another officer in the passenger seat. The younger officer behind the wheel seemed excited. His partner appeared older and less certain. Finally, both doors opened. The driver stepped out first. He was young, perhaps 26 or 27, with neatly cut hair and a uniform that looked almost new. His movements were quick and sharp. One hand stayed close to his belt as he approached. The second officer remained near the patrol car. Arthur noticed that immediately. The young officer stopped beside the driver's window. "License and insurance," he said. His badge read, Bradley Mitchell. Arthur looked at the name for a moment longer than necessary. Mitchell. Something about it felt familiar. "Good afternoon, Officer Mitchell," Arthur said. "May I ask why you stopped me?" Mitchell stared at him. "I asked for your license. I heard you. I'm asking why I was stopped." The officer leaned closer to the open window. His eyes moved over Arthur's old shirt, the worn interior of the truck, and the garment bag behind the seat. "You were drifting near the center line." Arthur knew that was not true. He also knew arguing over it would accomplish little. "My wallet is in the center console," he said. "I'm going to open it with my right hand." Mitchell's expression tightened. "Just do it." Arthur slowly moved his hand toward the console. "Slow down," Mitchell snapped. Arthur stopped. "My hand is still," he said. The older officer had now moved closer. His nameplate read, Russo. He appeared to be in his late 50s, with tired eyes and gray at his temples. He watched Arthur's hands, then looked at Mitchell. "Bradley," Russo said quietly. "Let him get his license." Mitchell ignored him. "What are you doing in Bellwether?" he asked Arthur. "Driving home." "From where?" "San Antonio." "Where's home?" Arthur turned his eyes toward the young officer. "Is that related to the reason for the stop?" Mitchell gave a short laugh without humor. "You people always make this harder than it needs to be." The words were spoken softly, but not softly enough. Russo looked away. Arthur felt the old pain return. Not anger at first, something colder. It was the feeling of sitting across from Daniel years earlier, watching his son pretend he had not been wounded by the way strangers saw him. Arthur studied Mitchell's face. Then the memory connected. Daniel had mentioned the name Mitchell, not Officer Bradley Mitchell, another Mitchell, a deputy who had been present during the search. Daniel believed the man had been the father of one of the younger officers. Arthur did not know whether there was a connection. He did not ask, not yet. "I would still like to know why I was stopped," Arthur said. "I told you, you were drifting. Then you may issue a warning or citation. My identification is in the console." Mitchell reached through the open window and unlocked the truck door. Arthur's voice changed. It remained calm, but the warmth left it. "Do not open my door." Mitchell pulled it open. "Step out of the vehicle. For a minor traffic concern? Step out now." Arthur looked toward Russo. The older officer's face showed unease, but he said nothing. That silence hurt more than Arthur expected. Across the road, two people had come out of a small grocery store. A woman raised her phone and began recording. A man stood beside her with his arms folded. Neither spoke. Farther down the street, a teenager watched from a bicycle. Everyone could see what was happening. No one came closer. Arthur slowly stepped from the truck. He was taller than Mitchell had expected. Even in ordinary clothes, he carried himself with a natural steadiness built over many years. He did not puff out his chest or raise his voice. He simply stood straight. That seemed to bother Mitchell even more. Hands on the truck. Arthur placed his palms against the warm metal of the hood. "Spread your feet." Arthur complied. Mitchell searched him roughly, patting his sides and legs with more force than the moment required. "There are no weapons on me," Arthur said. "I decide that. You are searching a cooperative man during a traffic stop without explaining why." Mitchell grabbed Arthur's left wrist. The movement was sudden. Arthur felt the officer twist his arm behind his back. "Do not resist." "I am not resisting." The first handcuff closed around his wrist. The sound was small, almost ordinary, yet it seemed to pull the entire town into silence. Arthur had spent his life giving orders in rooms where the future of thousands of people could change in a single conversation. He had stood beside presidents, briefed commanders, and attended the funerals of soldiers he had known by name. Now he was bent over the hood of his father's truck, while a young officer tightened steel around his wrists. Arthur closed his eyes for 1 second. He thought of Daniel. He wondered whether his son had stood in this same position. Mitchell pulled Arthur's other arm back and locked the second cuff. Russo stepped forward at last. "That's enough, Bradley. He hasn't done anything. He's refusing lawful commands. He gave you permission to get his license. He's acting suspicious." Arthur turned his head slightly. "Officer Russo," he said, "you know this is wrong." Russo's face changed. Arthur saw shame there. But Russo still did not act. Mitchell pushed Arthur more firmly against the hood. "Stop talking to my partner." Arthur looked through the windshield. Beneath the dashboard, just below the steering column, he could see the small emergency device. His cuffed hand was close to the open driver's door. He moved only an inch. Mitchell did not notice. Arthur pressed the hidden button with the side of his finger. There was no sound, no flashing light, nothing to show that a signal had just left the truck and traveled to a secure military system several miles away. Mitchell reached inside the vehicle and pulled open the center console. He found the wallet. "Finally," he muttered. He opened it and looked at Arthur's driver's license first. Then he saw the military card behind it. His eyes paused. The confidence in his face weakened. He removed the card and read it. Arthur watched him carefully. Mitchell looked at the photograph. Then the name. Then the rank printed beneath it. General Arthur Pendleton, United States Army. Mitchell read it again. Russo stepped closer. "What is it?" Mitchell held the card at an angle, as though he did not want his partner to see it. Russo took it from him. The older officer's breath left his body in a long, quiet exhale. "Bradley," he whispered, "take the cuffs off." Mitchell's jaw tightened. Russo lowered his voice. "He's a 4-star general." The people across the road continued recording. The young officer glanced toward them and saw the phones pointed in his direction. Fear entered his eyes, but pride arrived right behind it. "He still failed to follow instructions," Mitchell said. Russo stared at him. "What instructions? You stopped him for nothing. You heard him. He challenged everything I said. That is not a crime." Mitchell snatched the card back. Arthur slowly raised his head. "You have learned who I am," he said. "Now you have a choice. You can correct what you have done, or you can make it worse." Mitchell looked at him with a mixture of anger and panic. "You think your rank changes the law?" "No," Arthur replied. "That is exactly the point." For a moment, no one moved. Then a low sound rolled across the distance. It was not a police siren. It was deeper, heavier. Russo looked toward the southern road. 2 dark military vehicles appeared beyond the edge of town, moving quickly, but with complete control. A third followed behind them. No weapons were visible. No one leaned from the windows. There was no wild rush, only the steady approach of people who already knew where they were going. Mitchell stared at the vehicles. "What did you do?" he asked. Arthur's cheek remained against the sun-warmed metal of the truck. "I asked for help," he said. The military vehicles slowed as they reached the roadside. Their lights remained off. Doors opened in calm, practiced order. Uniformed military police stepped out. A woman, wearing the rank of colonel, walked at the front. She took in the scene, without raising her voice. She saw Arthur in handcuffs, Mitchell holding his military identification, Russo standing several feet away, and the townspeople recording from across the road. Her expression became very still. She stopped in front of Mitchell. "I am Colonel Rebecca Shaw," she said. "This is a controlled federal security response. Remove the handcuffs from General Pendleton and step away from him." Mitchell opened his mouth. No words came out. For the first time since the stop began, the young officer looked less like a man in control and more like someone standing at the edge of a truth he could no longer avoid. Arthur watched him carefully. The day was not over. In many ways, it had only just begun. The day was not over. In many ways, it had only just begun. Officer Bradley Mitchell stood beside the old blue pickup, with General Arthur Pendleton's military identification clenched in his hand. The three dark military vehicles rested along the shoulder behind him, their engines running softly. Nothing about the response was loud or wild. There were no raised rifles, no shouted threats, and no attempt to embarrass anyone. That calmness made the moment feel even heavier. Colonel Rebecca Shaw waited several feet away. "Remove the handcuffs," she repeated. Mitchell glanced toward the people standing across the road. 3 phones were now recording. More residents had gathered near the grocery store, drawn outside by the military vehicles. Arthur could see uncertainty on their faces. Some looked concerned. Others simply looked curious. None of them had spoken when Mitchell forced him against the truck. Russo slowly reached toward the handcuff key on Mitchell's belt. Mitchell slapped his hand away. "I'm the arresting officer," he said. "He was detained during a lawful traffic investigation." Colonel Shaw did not move. "What crime is he suspected of committing?" Mitchell looked toward Arthur as if the answer might appear on his face. "He was driving carelessly." "Then why is he in handcuffs?" "He became uncooperative." Arthur lifted his head slightly. "I asked why I had been stopped." Mitchell's eyes flashed with anger. "You kept challenging me." Colonel Shaw watched him for a long moment. "Asking a question is not a physical threat, Officer Mitchell. This is still my jurisdiction." "It is your responsibility," Shaw replied. "That is not the same thing." Russo stepped closer again. "Bradley, give me the key." Mitchell turned on him. "You don't get to act brave now." Russo froze. The words struck deeper than Mitchell had intended. Arthur could see it in the older officer's face. Russo had been carrying years of silence inside him, and Mitchell had just named it in front of everyone. Colonel Shaw looked toward one of the military police officers. "Contact the county sheriff and the state police. Ask for supervisors. Also notify the Federal Bureau of Investigation that we may have a civil rights incident involving a senior military officer." Mitchell's expression changed. "The FBI? This is not a punishment," Shaw said. "It is a review by agencies outside your department that protects the evidence, the public, and everyone standing here." Arthur noticed the careful choice of words. Shaw was making sure the response could never be described as military revenge. No one was being dragged away. No one was being threatened. Every step was being spoken clearly and recorded. Mitchell looked down at the key on his belt. For several seconds, pride continued fighting with fear. Then he removed it. The cuffs opened with 2 quiet clicks. Arthur brought his hands in front of him. Deep red marks circled both wrists. He rubbed them gently, but said nothing. Colonel Shaw took a step toward him. "General, do you need medical care?" "No. Are you sure?" Arthur looked at the marks. "I'm sure." Mitchell handed the military identification back to him without making eye contact. Arthur accepted it. "You knew who I was before you removed the cuffs," Arthur said. Mitchell's mouth tightened. "Yes, and you kept me restrained. You were detained." Arthur nodded slowly. That answer would matter later. A county sheriff's vehicle arrived first, followed by 2 state police cars. The officers approached carefully, speaking with Shaw, Russo, and Mitchell one at a time. Arthur stood beside his truck while a medic checked his wrists and shoulders. The people across the road continued recording. An older woman lowered her phone and walked closer. She stopped several yards away.
"General,"
she called softly. Arthur looked toward her.
"I'm sorry,"
she said. "We should have said something." The man standing beside her stared at the ground. Arthur did not answer immediately. He understood fear. He had seen fear keep soldiers alive, and he had seen it destroy people who allowed it to make every decision for them. "You saw what was happening," Arthur finally said. "Yes, sir." "And you believed it was wrong?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Yes." Arthur nodded once. "Then remember how silence felt." He did not say it cruelly. That made the words harder to escape. The state police supervisor asked Mitchell to surrender his weapon and badge while the stop was investigated. Mitchell protested, but the supervisor remained firm. "You are not under arrest," the man explained. "You are being placed on administrative leave. Your camera, vehicle system, and written report will be preserved." Mitchell looked toward Russo. "Tell them what happened." Russo opened his mouth. For a moment, Arthur thought the older officer might protect him. Instead, Russo looked at the ground. He had his hands visible, he said. He answered the questions. He said where his wallet was. Bradley opened the door and ordered him out. Mitchell stared at him. "You're twisting it." "I watched you put cuffs on him for asking why he was stopped. You stood there." Russo's face tightened. "Yes," he whispered. "I did." That answer ended something between them. Mitchell was escorted to a state police vehicle for a formal interview. As he walked toward it, an old sedan stopped near the blocked road. A woman in her 50s stepped out. She had Mitchell's eyes and the same sharp line around her mouth. "Bradley!" she called. Mitchell stopped. The woman hurried toward him until a trooper asked her to remain behind the marked boundary. "What happened?" she asked. Mitchell looked suddenly young. "Mum, go home. Why are they taking your badge? No one is taking me anywhere." She looked past him and saw Arthur standing beside the truck. Her face slowly changed as she understood enough of the situation to become afraid. "Bradley," she said, lowering her voice, "what did you do?" He turned away. Arthur felt no satisfaction in watching the woman's confusion. He saw a mother looking at her son and realizing that part of him had remained hidden from her. It was not justice yet. It was only the first consequence. Colonel Shaw offered to have Arthur driven home, but he refused. "I need to look at the truck," he said. "General, your vehicle can be recovered. It has a problem under the hood." Shaw studied him. After years of working with Arthur, she understood that the truck was not the real reason he wanted to remain. "I'll stay nearby," she said. The road gradually cleared. The military vehicles moved to the edge of the abandoned gas station. State police collected statements and copied recordings from the witnesses. Mitchell was driven away for questioning. Russo remained beside his patrol car. Arthur opened the hood of the pickup and leaned over the engine. His hands moved from one hose to another, checking connections with the slow care his father had taught him. The familiar work steadied him. Still, his fingers began to shake. At first, the movement was slight. Then it became strong enough that he had to set the wrench down. Arthur placed both hands on the edge of the truck. He lowered his head. The humiliation returned all at once. The hand on his wrist, the pressure against the hood, the watching faces, the cuffs closing. For years, people had treated his calmness as if it meant he felt no pain. Soldiers believed generals were made from harder material than everyone else. Reporters described him as unshakable. Even members of his own family sometimes looked to him as though he were a wall that could hold forever. But strength did not erase pain. It only taught a person where to carry it. Arthur stepped behind the open hood, so the remaining officers could not see his face. His breathing became uneven. He pressed his fist against his mouth, trying to remain silent. He thought of Daniel at 20 years old. He imagined his son alone beside this same road, watched by strangers who did nothing. For the first time that day, Arthur allowed himself to cry. The tears came quietly. They were not only for what Mitchell had done, they were for the years between Daniel's complaint and this moment. They were for every person whose story had ended with a short letter saying an officer had followed policy. Colonel Shaw saw him from a distance. She did not approach. She simply turned the others away and gave him privacy. Several minutes later, Arthur wiped his face, picked up the wrench, and returned to the engine. By sunset, the truck was running again. The formal investigation began the following morning. The state police transferred the evidence to the FBI after the first witness interviews showed that the traffic stop may have been part of a larger pattern. Mitchell's body camera had recorded most of the encounter. The audio clearly captured his statement about, "You people." Russo's camera showed Arthur's steady driving before the stop and revealed that the patrol officers had followed him for nearly 2 miles without observing a traffic violation. The supposed drifting had never happened. Investigators then reviewed Mitchell's arrest history. They found complaints involving Black and Hispanic drivers, young men traveling through Bellwether, and families who said Mitchell had searched their vehicles without clear cause. Many reports had been closed quickly. Several had never been entered into the public complaint system at all. Police Chief Warren Gable insisted he knew nothing about missing reports. The records told another story. Email messages showed that Gable had personally asked supervisors to describe several complaints as misunderstandings. He had warned officers that too many sustained complaints could affect department funding. In one message, he described Mitchell as aggressive but useful. The FBI also discovered that Bradley Mitchell's father, Thomas Mitchell, had served as a Bellwether deputy 15 years earlier. Arthur read that part of the report alone in his office. The old memory returned with perfect clarity. Daniel had said one of the officers was named Mitchell. Investigators reopened the complaint. The remaining records were thin, but Russo remembered the incident. He had been a young officer then. Thomas Mitchell had stopped Daniel's car, ordered him out, and searched the vehicle. Russo had arrived later and recognized that the car did not match the stolen vehicle report. He had said nothing. The department dismissed Daniel's complaint after Chief Gable, then a captain, approved the finding. When the FBI confronted Russo with the old file, something inside him finally gave way. He requested another interview. For nearly 4 hours, Russo described what he had seen during his career. He spoke about altered reports, hidden complaints, and officers encouraged to target certain neighborhoods and drivers. He admitted that he had spent years telling himself that silence was not the same as taking part. "I was wrong," he said in his recorded statement. "Every time I stayed quiet, I helped it happen again." His testimony became the foundation of the federal case. Arthur did not celebrate when he received the news. He called Daniel. His son was now a middle-aged teacher with 2 children of his own. He listened silently as Arthur explained that the old complaint had been reopened. "Why now?" Daniel asked. "Because the same department stopped me." Daniel gave a tired laugh. "So they finally care because it happened to a general." Arthur closed his eyes. "That is what I am trying to change." For a long time, neither man spoke. Then Daniel asked the question Arthur had been avoiding. "Did they put you against the car?" "Yes." "Did people watch?" "Yes." Daniel breathed slowly. "I'm sorry, Dad." Arthur's voice softened. "I understand now in a way I should have understood then. You believed me. I believed the facts. I don't know if I understood the feeling." That truth moved quietly between them. Months passed. Mitchell was charged with unlawful detention, falsifying an official statement, and violating Arthur's civil rights under color of law. He entered a guilty plea after the body camera evidence and witness recordings made his defense impossible. Chief Gable was charged with obstruction, evidence concealment, and participation in a pattern of civil rights violations. Several other officers agreed to cooperate. Russo was not excused for his silence. He lost his position and faced disciplinary action. However, prosecutors considered his full cooperation when recommending his sentence. He later testified publicly about the damage caused by officers who witness abuse but refuse to intervene. Bellwether's police department was placed under federal oversight. New rules required outside review of civilian complaints, stronger body camera protections, anti-bias training, and a clear duty for officers to stop misconduct committed by colleagues. The town also created a civilian review board that included residents from neighborhoods most affected by police stops. Arthur gave only one public statement during the process. He stood in the Bellwether courthouse, not in uniform, but in the same simple gray shirt he had worn during the stop. "What happened to me matters," he told the crowded room, "but it does not matter more because I am a general. The law did not become important after Officer Mitchell discovered my rank. It was important before he opened my truck door. It was important when my son came through this town 15 years ago. It was important for every person whose complaint was ignored because they lacked the title, money, or influence to force someone to listen." He paused and looked toward Russo, who was sitting in the back row. "Accountability is not revenge. It is the difficult work of making sure the next person is safer than the last." After the hearing, Arthur walked alone toward the parking lot. A black man in his early 30s waited beside the old blue truck. One of his legs was supported by a metal brace. "General Pendleton?" the man asked. Arthur stopped. "My name is Marcus Reed." Arthur recognized the name from the investigation. Marcus had been stopped by Mitchell 2 years earlier. A search of his vehicle found nothing, but the encounter ended with Marcus pushed to the ground. The injury damaged his knee and ended his work as a delivery driver. His complaint had disappeared. "I wanted to thank you," Marcus said. Arthur looked at the brace. "You should never have needed me." Marcus gave a small, sad smile. But they listened this time. Arthur opened the truck's tailgate, and the two men sat down. Marcus told him about the job he had lost and the months when he could not pay rent. He spoke about the anger that followed him into his home and the shame of needing help from his younger sister. Arthur listened without interrupting. The legal case had punished Mitchell. The department had been forced to change. Yet none of it could return the lost work, the damaged knee, or the years Marcus had spent wondering whether anyone believed him. Justice could open a door. It could not always repair what had happened before the door opened. Arthur reached into the truck and took out a small card. It contained information for a new legal and medical support program created for earlier victims of the department. Part of the funding came from the federal settlement. The rest came from private donations Arthur had helped organize. "This will not fix everything," Arthur said. Marcus accepted the card. "No," he replied, "but maybe it's a start." The evening air cooled as they sat together. Across the courthouse square, workers were removing the old police department sign. A temporary one rested against the wall, waiting to be installed after the new oversight board approved it. Arthur looked at the old truck. He had finally repaired the rattle beneath the hood. A loose bracket had been striking the engine whenever the road became uneven. His father would have found it in minutes. Every engine gave a warning before it failed. So did institutions. The complaints had been warnings. Daniel had been a warning. Russo's silence had been a warning. The town had ignored them until the damage became too large to hide. Arthur stood and offered Marcus his hand. Marcus took it. As Arthur drove out of Bellwether, the sun disappeared behind the fields. The road ahead became quiet, lit only by the truck's aging headlights. His wrists had healed, but he could still remember the weight of the handcuffs. He knew he always would. Justice had not erased the humiliation. It had not returned what Daniel or Marcus had lost. It had not transformed every frightened witness into a brave one, but it had forced the truth into the open. It had given earlier victims a voice. And somewhere in Bellwether, a young officer beginning the night shift now understood that silence, prejudice, and unchecked pride carried consequences. Arthur rested one hand on the wheel and listened to the steady sound of the repaired engine. The truck continued down the dark Texas road, carrying him home. Behind him, the town was finally beginning the harder repair.